Uh-oh, your friend is forcing you to play Dungeons & Dragons and they told you to make your first character and read all the rules and do all that before your first session, but you don't know anything about Dungeons & Dragons because you're too busy not being mentally ill. And your friend tells you just make sure you read all of this and look at all the races and classes, but that's not enough because you also have to read all of this because it's like just as important as the player's handbook. Oops, I thought this was supposed to be a game, not school, because school is for nerds and Dungeons & Dragons is for cool people. But don't worry, because I'm here to explain every single Dungeons & Dragons class to you and make it as easy as possible so that hopefully you can at least figure out what your class is going to be. And that's like half the battle. Almost everything I mention will be directly from the player's handbook, so if your DM has that, or if you want to purchase the player's handbook, you can learn way more just by looking at that. There are a couple of things I'm going to mention that are in Xanathar's guide, which is official, but just make sure it's cool with your DM that you're using that. Anyway, let's start with my first category of classes, which are the weapon fighters. Do you like getting down and dirty with a bow or a sword or a great axe? Well then, you might be a weapon fighter. Do you think magic is kind of overrated and a little bit spooky? Then you might be a weapon fighter. Do you wish this bit would end? Me too. Barbarian. If your favorite superhero is the Hulk, then you should probably play Barbarian. Barbarians are big, buff damage dealers. They swing down massive axes or swords or anything else they can find to do huge amounts of damage with each blow. They get their power from just naturally being incredibly strong, and they're really, really strong. Barbarians are extra cool because they actually get a bonus for fighting naked, and that's because regular armor would just get in the way of them killing people. Barbarians are generally really high health, really high strength characters, which means they're extremely durable in combat and really excel at getting face to face with their enemies and killing them before they have a chance to do anything. Barbarians can withstand a ton of damage, and sometimes they even want to take damage. That's because of their main class ability called Rage. Rage does a lot of cool things, but it all boils down to making you way stronger than you already are. Is there a thick metal door that needs to be opened? Rage will help you kick it down way easier. Is there a bad guy that needs to be taught a lesson? Rage will let you do even more damage. Did an arrow just hit you in the frickin' face? Rage will cut that damage in half because you're too busy being angry to feel pain. Barbarians are a lot of fun to play, and on top of that, they're really easy to play. Almost every turn is just going to be you trying to get to an enemy and hitting them really hard with your weapon. If there's any downsides, it's that generally barbarians are a little bit on the dumber side, which makes them really fun to roleplay and kind of makes you an adorable bloodthirsty teddy bear, but you might not enjoy that kind of playstyle. Also, they have super low mobility, which means sometimes getting in range of people to attack them with your weapon can be kind of a pain, especially against spellcasters. Ugh. But trust me, when you do catch them, they'll be dead before they even get a word out. Fighter. Fighters are like barbarians if barbarians were nerds. Fighters, believe it or not, are really good fighters. They can use basically any weapon, a bow, a sword, dual wielding, a sword and a shield, whatever you want. You choose that right when you make your fighter. But unlike barbarians who just use their natural strength to do a bunch of damage, fighters really excel at their battle training that they've received over years. Fighters, I would say, are the most varied of any class based on which fighting style you choose. But typically, fighters wear heavy armor and do a lot of damage, so unlike the barbarian who can just withstand a lot of hits, a fighter's just harder to hit. Your fighter will really come into its own at 3rd level when you choose what's called a martial archetype. Do you want to be a tactical mastermind who knows how to exploit the weaknesses in your enemies or help rally your allies? Then you could be a battle master fighter. Do you want to focus on really doing as much damage as you possibly can? Well, then you want to be a champion fighter. Or are you the rare kind of fighter that's looking at all your friends casting fire spells all over the place and you're like, man, I want to do that. Well, then you could be the Eldritch Knight, which still gets all the benefits of being a fighter, but can cast spells too. Plus, it's called an Eldritch Knight. That's so cool, that's such a cool name. Again, like barbarians, fighters are really easy to play and they can be whatever you want them to be. So if you're kind of unsure of what exactly you want your character to do, fighter might be a good pick just to get you started. Ranger. You know Legolas? Yeah, this is like basically Legolas. Rangers are primarily bow fighters, but again, like fighter, you can kind of choose whatever weapon style you want to choose. Rangers are excellent trackers and hunters, and they really excel in the outdoors, and they get really cool features because of that. Rangers get something called a favored enemy, which is an enemy they know so much about that they actually get physical benefits when they fight them. Because of your experience hunting and tracking down this specific enemy, you'll always be able to track them down way easier than anything else, and you also can recall information about them really easily, like their weaknesses or their attack styles. On top of that, you also get something called Natural Explorer, which gives you a favored terrain, which just means you get to pick an environment that your ranger particularly enjoys being in, and you get all sorts of benefits when you're in that environment. No matter what you're doing, you're always going to be alert to danger, which means you're not going to be ambushed while you're in your favorite terrain. All the skills you're proficient in, which means you're already good at them, will get an extra bonus while you're in your favorite terrain too, so it's really just awesome, and it really lends itself to some cool role-playing. On top of that, rangers do veer a little bit into the spellcasting territory because they do get a small set of spells that they can use to ensnare their enemies or cause vines to erupt from the ground with their arrows. It's a really cool class overall. It is a little bit underpowered though, so if your DM is comfortable with it, ask them about the Unearthed Arcana Ranger. It's not official yet, so I'm just gonna say that about it, but it is cool. Monks, they don't use weapons. They don't use weapons. A monk's best weapon is its fist, because monks are really, really good unarmed fighters, and they excel at doing a little bit of damage a lot. Starting at first level, monks can already do 2 attacks in 1 turn by punching, and then punching again. I guess you have 2 fists, so that makes sense. At second level though is when you get access to what's called Ki, which is basically the energy that monks can use to manipulate their attacks and their foes. You use this Ki by spending what's called Ki points, and the most exciting one of them all is called Flurry of Blows, where when you punch someone, you can spend a Ki point and punch them 2 more times. Monks are also extremely mobile, not just by using their Ki points, but also just naturally they have 10 feet of extra movement, which is for most characters like 30% more movement per turn. And at third level, things just get cooler by using your Ki points to knock people down or push them away or surround them in darkness while you assault them sneakily. Monks are just really cool. They're also really out there. They're definitely the most different of all the classes, but it's really cool to roleplay. Like, why did your character become a monk? Why did they leave their monastery? What did their monastic training teach them? If you don't care about roleplaying, maybe it's not for you. But if you like punching, it's for you. Rogue. Boo, here I am. I snuck up on you because I'm a rogue. Stab, 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 stab. Rogues specialize in stealthing around and using light weapons like daggers and short swords, and they can even dual wield and use bows. Their main feature that they get right from the start is something called a sneak attack, which does extra damage if you have advantage against the opponent. Advantage just means you get to roll twice and take the higher result, so you have a higher chance of hitting. Sneak attack is actually more complicated than that, but we're not gonna go into it, it's fine. A rogue's stealthing ability and damage dealing makes them really interesting to play not only in combat, but also out of combat, because you can use your tools to avoid combat entirely. You need to go steal a precious diamond? You can just go in there and be like, mine now, and no one will know. I mean, they might know. You might fail your stealth roll and then start a big fight, and your party's gonna be like, you can't just keep stealthing off without us. You have to tell us when you're gonna stealth away. And you're like, I don't think so. Yeah. Also, rogues might be for you if you grew up listening to Linkin Park, because rogues are edgy. That's like the meme. Just keep that in mind. Rogues are also really, really easy to play, and they're a lot of fun to play. I think they're a great class for beginners, but still, you can just play whatever sounds fun to you. Don't worry too much about what's hard to play. Spellcasters. You know what sucks? Weapons. Oh, hate them. Yuck. Getting up close and personal and getting blood on my hands? No thanks. I'll just sit back here and cast Fireball. If that sounds appealing to you, then you should consider playing a Spellcaster. Wizard. Wizards are your standard spellcasters. They're exactly what everyone thinks of when they think of a spellcaster. Wizards are people who are just massive nerds and read a lot of books, and that's how they got their magical ability. They really worked for it, and for that reason, they have access to like every single spell in the game. This wide range of spells can make wizards a little bit overwhelming, but it also means you have a large variety of things you can do. One of the choices you'll make early on as a wizard is which school of magic you want to belong to. Do you want to raise the dead? You should be a necromancer. Do you want to make massive tentacles appear and slap your enemies? Maybe that's a conjuration. But even the school you join doesn't limit your spell list. It's just the particular spells you're really good at and can learn really easily. All a wizard ever does is cast spells. If you're in combat or out of combat, you're casting a spell. You're not using a weapon. And spellcasting is a finite resource per day because wizards and all spellcasters use something called a spell slot to cast a spell. So that means you have to be a little bit picky when you're going to choose to cast certain spells, and that's an extra layer of decision making on top of already a lot of decisions wizards have to make. Because every single day a wizard has to prepare certain spells. They have a huge list of spells that they can prepare at the beginning of a day, but they only get to pick a handful each day to actually use. And then when you're in combat, you have to choose which spells you want to use. Really, with wizards, there's a lot of options, like an infinite amount of options, and it can be really overwhelming, but it's a great chance to be creative with your character and to really make combat memorable. So I really like wizards, but a lot of people think it's the hardest class to play, and I can't argue with that, so just know what you're getting into if you want to play one. Sorcerer. Sorcerers are cool because it's like, hey, wizards are really hard, and it's like, okay, sorcerers, they're just easier wizards. It also makes sense from a role-playing perspective because sorcerers don't do any reading or learning. No, they're the nepo baby of spellcasters. They just got their spellcasting either by random chance or usually by having a spellcasting mommy or daddy or some other member of their bloodline. The big difference with sorcerers versus wizards is something called sorcerer points. Sorcerer points let you affect your magic in different ways. Do you want to cast a single target spell on multiple targets? Your sorcerer points can do that. Do you want to double the range of one of your spells? Sorcerer points can do that. But wait, that doesn't sound like it's easier. That sounds like there's more to that than being a wizard. Well, sorcerers don't have the huge list of spells that wizards have. Not only do they not just learn spells by going around the world, they also just have a smaller list of possible spells they can learn at each level up. So sorcerers don't need to do the whole preparing spells every day or anything like that. It's a lot easier to play, in my opinion. One of the cool things to pick at the very beginning of making your sorcerer, though, is its sorceress origin. Where did you get your spellcasting from? In the player's handbook, you have draconic ancestry, which means dragons in your bloodline. And there's also wild magic, which means there's a chance of some random effect happening whenever you cast the spell, and it can be really funny. But sorcerers is where I really recommend checking out Xanathar's guide. There's some really cool origins in here, and I think they're actually better than what's in the player's handbook. But again, ask your DM, and if you don't want to shell out the money, it's fine. Warlock. You are a person of great magical ability, but not because you worked for it. It's like the Sorcerer. You see I'm doing like the Sorcerer a bit. Warlocks got their magic by making a deal with some sort of great powerful being. It could be they made a deal with a devil, or a god, or a fae, which is like a cool little nature thingy. This usually comes at a price for the Warlock. It could be anything from a couple dollars to your entire soul. Usually it's the soul thing. Warlocks are awesome from a role-playing perspective, but they're also really unique spellcasters. They have way fewer spell slots that I mentioned before than any other caster, but they get them back on a short rest. Usually you have to wait for the day to end and get a full night's sleep to get your spell slots back. With a Warlock, you just take a quick little power nap of like 1 hour and boom, you got all your spell slots back. Warlocks are also really cool as they level up because their patron, the person they made the deal with, will give them extra abilities. You'll get things called Eldritch Invocations, which can make your spells more powerful or give you the ability to cast spells you normally wouldn't be able to. And at 3rd level, you get what's called a Pact Boon, which is like your patron giving you a little treat for being such a good boy or girl. And it's like you're a good little Warlock. Warlocks just have a really interesting set of spells, and like Sorcerer, you don't have to prepare any of them, you just always have them ready. But Warlocks are one of my personal favorite classes just for like the story you can write about them, but I'm a nerd, you don't have to worry about that. They're fun to play, they cast magic, they're cool. Druid. Is there an animal inside of you that you just need to unleash, but you also don't want to become a furry? Druid sounds like it might be for you. Druids are spellcasters who get their magical ability by being super in tune with nature and its inhabitants. They work somewhat similarly to wizards, where they have to prepare a list of spells to use every day, and again, that can be overwhelming, but druids are so freaking cool. Starting at just 2nd level, you will gain an ability called Wild Shape, which lets you literally transform into any beast that you have laid eyes on before. There are limitations on what exactly the kind of beast you can transform into is, but those limitations go away as you level up. Oh man, but what if I turn into a beast and it dies, and then I die? That would suck. No, wrong, actually. If your hit points go to 0 in your beast form, you just turn back into yourself with whatever hit points you had before. It's so neat, it's so neat, it's so neat. That's so neat. The only concerning part is where your weapons go. you kind of absorb your weapons when you go into wild shape. So I'm pretty sure your weapons go in your butt. When you reach 3rd level as a druid, you get to join a druidic circle, but the one everyone joins is called the Circle of the Moon, because the Circle of the Moon lets you use your wild shape as what's called a bonus action. What that means is on the same turn during combat, you can transform into an animal and then slap your enemies on the same turn. Druids are so cool, man. Druids are so freaking cool. Druids are also good if you don't want to be just a pure damage dealer, but you also want to help out a little bit, because druids do have a lot of healing and restoration spells. So druids are just really well-rounded spellcasters, and I think they're so much fun to play. And yes, they're a lot to handle, but just give it a shot. You'll have fun. Supporters, are you a people pleaser, or do you often take the corner pieces of the brownies because everyone already ate all the good parts? That's right, I don't like the corners of brownies, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Well, if any of that sounds like you, then you might want to play a support class. Support classes are friendly people who heal their allies and give their allies special abilities, and they're really nice, and it's really great when you have one in your group. Bard, everyone's little funny favorite little funny little guy. They're not like actually little unless you choose to play a smaller race. It's just very frequently people who want to play bards want to play smaller races. Science doesn't know why yet, but it is true. Bards are musical masterminds who play their instruments so good they literally have magical effects. They do have a relatively small list of spells to use, but what they can do is really, really important, both in and out of combat. Their main ability is called Bardic Inspiration, where they can play a little ditty for their friends, and then their friends all of a sudden become really good at attacking or at picking locks, or really at anything. If you have a rogue trying to break into a mansion, the bard just has to bust out its lute and be like, ding, 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 keep going, ding, 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 ding. And the rogue's like, yeah, I can do this. But there is a dark side to bards, because they're not always happy-go-lucky, smiley, healing people. No, they are also the most vicious bullies since Regina George. Bards have several abilities and spells meant to harm people, the most notable of which is called Cutting Words. Cutting Words is basically the bard saying something so viciously mean that the enemy becomes less able to hit or even able to do less damage. Bards also have a spell called Vicious Mockery, which is just them saying something so mean that it literally makes the enemy take damage. So bards are, like, they're cool. I like bards. Bards are also pretty easy to play, and everyone loves having a bard, so I highly recommend bards. Cleric. God. That's who you love now. You love God. Your chosen deity has granted you great power because you've shown yourself to be a super devoted, good little cleric. Your most notable power is your ability to be an extremely good healer. But you're also heavily armored, usually wield a pretty badass weapon, and are just generally awesome. Clerics are far and away the best healers in D&D, and it is not close, but they can be so much more than healers. At first level, you choose what's called a domain for your cleric, and your domain will really decide how your cleric plays. There's the life domain if you do want to go the healer route, but there's also the light domain so you can have access to a bunch of fire spells, or the tempest domain where you can make wind. Or if you're feeling a little naughty, you can go with the trickery domain, which will let you use things like charm person so that people will like you, or disguise self so you look a little different. All I'm saying is clerics are awesome, they are great healers, but you should not be afraid to play them however you want. The one issue is that clerics can be a little tough to roleplay because your chosen deity and your chosen domain will dictate so much about who your character is that there's not as much creative freedom, but I still think you can have a good time with a cleric very easily. Paladins. God, that's who you love now. Your chosen deity. Wait, nope, sorry, that's the script for clerics. Paladins are like warriors for God. So instead of casting a bunch of spells like clerics do, they cast a bunch of sword into the face of their enemies. I debated putting paladins into weapon fighters, but paladins do have a lot of healing and empowering abilities, so I do think they're kind of a support fighter hybrid class. Paladins have sworn an oath that dictates basically everything about who they are, and you will choose your oath at first level. Do you want to kill anyone who wrongs an innocent even a little bit? The Oath of Vengeance is for you. Do you want to hold yourself to the highest possible standards? Oath of Devotion might be what you're looking for. The type of oath that you choose will dictate what kind of spells you get as a paladin, but really just choose whatever sounds the coolest to you. A really cool thing about Paladins is something called smites. Paladins can use smites to add extra damage or effects to their weapon attacks. The most popular one by far is called Divine Smite, where you literally just add God-given damage to your sword strikes. It's really freaking cool. But Paladins are also gentle lovers who can use something called Lay on Hands. Everyday Paladins get a pool of health that they can use through Lay on Hands to heal their allies. But if they don't need to heal their allies, they can also cure poisons or remove diseases. It's a really powerful, very useful spell to have around. Like Clerics, Paladins can be a little hard to roleplay because of the whole, oath basically dictating who you are, but they can also be really fun to roleplay, especially when you look into something called an Oathbreaker Paladin. It's not in the player's handbook, so I won't mention it, but it is official and it's very cool. So that's all of the classes in D&D, and if I had any recommendations for which you should play, whichever sounds the coolest to you. If you're with a halfway decent DM, they'll help walk you through everything that class can do and answer any questions. And ultimately, even if you do pick a hard class, that just means you have more to learn, and the learning is a really cool part of D&D. Yeah, I know it sounds nerdy, but it's true. If you hear people say things like, oh, rangers are super weak, or oh, rogues are super boring to play, don't listen to them. It's an opinion. Everyone has one. Make your own opinion. Just play what you want. Anyway, I'm gonna go to sleep.